board. Hey, how about that Super Bowl? Best thing about the Super Bowl, Packers weren't in it. Oh, zing. I was pulling it first for Baby Goat, future Goat, and then I realized that wasn't going to happen because that other team was playing defense. That's right, defense. Yep. I don't know. Pretty good game. I guess I was hoping it would be a little bit more exciting. I feel like what happened to all the talking animals in Super Bowl commercials? Definitely a bit disappointed as far as when Beavis and Butthead, that's like when I was in high school, when Beavis and Butthead owns the Super Bowl commercials. I guess I really can't finish that sentence. I think that's just fine, actually. We're going to continue today with chapter 3. Hackers were robbed. Yep, in Lambeau. So let me see. Anything? Nothing else? Nobody has any questions? There's a test this week. We're all good. All right. I will. I guess I'll just get into chapter 3 then. That's fine with me. I'm cool with that. Yeah. All right. Let me pull this up, y'all, and then I will start. And really, I really just want to read this, and then I'll get to the first question. So we're moving on. We're going to start talking about multiculturalism today, and this is a quote from Mexican writer Carlos Fuentes. What the U.S. or United States does best is understand itself. What it does worse is understand others. So let's look at our questions, as we're going to be talking a little bit about multiculturalism. And I'm going to at least just say up front, whenever we talk about inequality, race, multiculturalism, gender, whatever that piece is of inequality, remember that every time, here's what I want you to be thinking of. Responsibility. Because I think there's two ways that we can go. And one is guilt. And that doesn't do anybody any good. And guilt is what you feel when you know something is wrong, but maybe you haven't made an effort to do something about it. Whatever, guilt. It's pretty pointless and useless, unless you're the Catholic Church. Hey, anyway. And I guess on the other side of that would be responsibility, right? So when we talk about race, things like that, it's not so that people feel guilty if you're in dominant culture, it's so that we can look at this and take responsibility for the inequalities that we know exist, right? And they do. All right. So people waited to ask questions until I started kind of in with the chapter. So I'm going to push those questions to the end of the day rather than address them right now, because that makes it easier for me to concentrate. All right. In your opinion, does everyone have equal access to opportunities? All right. This is an opinion question. Does everybody have equal access to opportunities, social, economic, etc., in the United States, regardless of race, religion, age, ability, etc.? So let's look at. Shrink that down. Sorry. Clicked the wrong thing. And we have 66 people that chimed in. In your opinion, does everyone have equal access in the United States? 4 people said yes. 62 people said no. So on this one, unlike other ones where there might be some questions where there's a right and a wrong, although this is an opinion one, this is a right and a wrong question. No, certainly not. Everyone does not have equal access. Nor are we promised equal access. So we'll talk about why that is. Let me go get the door for Huckle. He had to go out just a minute ago. Sorry. Hey, everybody, it's Huckle. Come on in, buddy. Hey, good boy. Oh, I guess Boston Terrier's got to get on that action too. Because we can't be giving too much love to any of the big dogs, or the little dogs get jealous. I think that's could be just a thing with little dogs, or maybe it's my dog. Anyway, why did you answer the way that you answered? Well, let's move to the next one. In your opinion, does everyone? Yeah, because this is, again, where I would like to say that there is no right or wrong. Clearly, not everybody has equal access. All right, let's go to the next one. This, I think, a bit more interesting and a bit more split. Is racism, prejudice, and discrimination still a problem in the United States? 54 people said yes, 13 people said minor problem, 0 people said not at all. So that's good. Yeah, contradicting maybe the last one a bit. But yeah, what do you think? Why did you vote the way you voted? What did you vote? Is racism, prejudice, and discrimination still a problem in the United States? We've got 54 people say yes, 13 say it's a minor problem. How do you see this? And certainly, the whole semester, the reason I'm asking questions live is not just so the people that did Top Hat, can answer. That's, you could just do that like from, wherever. So if you do have an opinion, and even if you didn't use Top Hat, please.
Buy saltwater fish stick at home, so we wouldn't even have to buy corals.
All right, thank you, Grace. All right, what do you think? 55 people said it's a major problem. 13 people said minor. Nobody said not at all. What did you vote and why?
I said minor problem because it's not as bad as it used to be. I mean, there's still stuff going on today, but it's just not as bad as it used to be.
I think, important observation into this question would be, yeah, I mean, if we really look back 50 years or 100 years, like we were doing, right? Looking back to the 1950s, it was like 70 years ago, we're talking about the cultural differences. Things are much different than they were. So I think from a perspective, getting better or not as much of a problem. Other thoughts?
I don't have Top Hat, but I would say yes, it is still like an extreme problem on the basis that one of the biggest reasons that I think that is because I learned very recently about sundown towns, which, like, if you guys don't know what that is, like they still exist. It's like basically where like during the day like everything's chill, but then like at night, if you're a person of color, like you can be like attacked and like killed, and like the police won't say anything about it. And like I didn't know because I'm from New England, so like that just like isn't really like, I don't see that a lot. But one of my friends came from a sundown town and he was like, yeah, like the police don't say anything about it. Like it still happens all the time. All the time.
All right. So we have, rampant and extreme examples of racism, including police participating in that behavior, that we condemn. And I know that certainly when we're talking about recent events at the Capitol, there were, and I can't remember how many, not a lot, but several members of the National Guard that were vetted that had connections to white supremacist organizations, and the police that were there as well. So, some of those people were removed before the inauguration, but not at the point on January 6th. Okay, who else? Bella, Julia, I see some hands up. Anybody?
Yeah, I said it's a major problem because of like exactly what Beth said. There's still blatant racism in a lot of towns. And I think people in like other places, like maybe Fort Collins or bigger places like that, more populated places, don't really realize that those towns exist. And it's still really dangerous. And like even not in small towns, like 2019 was the record high for anti-Semitic hate crimes, like ever. So that's like that, like there has been like an uptick, like a huge uptick in like white supremacy, anti-Semitism, racism, like scientifically, like statistically proven there has been. So yeah. I think that's important to say, even if it's better than the 1920s, it's been 100 years. So like that should happen.
Absolutely. And we really don't want to use, I mean, the class showed me how I don't want to use the 1950s as a measuring stick for how I talk to people like my partner who identifies herself as gender female. Certainly in many ways, we shouldn't be using the 1920s as our measuring stick for race relations. Sure, Lori or Julia?
So actually, I want to jump off the anti-Semitic thing in 2019. I'm from Poway, California, where there was a synagogue shooting in 2019. I don't, like, some of you guys have heard of it. So yeah, it is still a big issue. I was afraid that people I knew were gonna die. I didn't know what was happening. I lived that. And so you can't just look at prejudice and discrimination and say, oh, it's not as bad as it was. People are still dying, for just what they believe in or what they look like. And that's things that they can't control. And like, that's something that not a lot of people have had the opportunity to live. But being a white Protestant Christian woman, I don't have to deal with it as much aside from the gender discrimination. But that doesn't mean I don't know people who I thought were going to die. Like the closest thing I have to like a real mom, she was like, I didn't know if she was there or not. And so it's just like, you can't just like look at stuff like that still happening and call it a minor issue, in my opinion.
Good. Anyone else? See a couple of hands sort of.
I was gonna say, I think it's like still a big issue, but I think it's better than it used to be because it's just like not as normalized in our culture, which is a little bit misleading because I think it actually is shifting to where it's coming back and being a big part of our culture again, like you saw with like the Capitol riots and everything. And I also think it has a lot to do with like location. Like you go down to the South and you'll see people with like Confederate flags flying out of their trucks. And I don't think you're ever going to see that in like Denver, or you might see it in Denver now, but like usually you don't see that kind of thing in Denver. So I think like region does make a really big difference.
Absolutely. And I can't remember the part of it now, but it was really good. It was either, I think it was Chris Rock, or maybe it was Dave Chappelle, but they were just talking about the difference in racism between the South and the North, or the South and other places, and how, you know, one is very institutionalized and very covert, and another one is very in your face. And, you know, and why each one has, obviously they don't have their merits, but why one was appreciated over the other. At least as far as like, I think what he was saying is, yeah, you know, at least you know where you stand in the South, which is very different in some other places. Good. All right. So let me, anybody else before I move on?
Oh, I have one thing I would like to say.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know how to get rid of this background, so I'm sorry.
All right.
But basically, I'm from the South, so I like the deep South, and it can get very racist down there. And for the 4th of July, I decided to put sidewalk chalk for BLM on my street, and it got spray painted over with like immediately afterwards, which was very scary. And I had a woman come up to my house and bang on my door and scream at me for doing that. Not that it like directly affected me because I'm a white woman, you know, but I was just trying to make a safe environment for the other POCs who lived in my neighborhood. And I was just like, this is scary.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I just drove by as I was dropping off Storm to Rocky the other day at the Unitarian Church that always has some really awesome, loving and encompassing signs. We welcome our whatever, Muslim brothers and sisters, you name it, trans brothers and sisters. And now they've got a big sign up that says BLM. And oftentimes I see those signs in the past vandalized and torn down and things of that nature, but they persist, which I really do like. Although that can be a very scary thing to persist when it's your property and your place and people know are attacking you or your vehicle, or depending on that thing, for sure. Okay, good. And I see some people have chimed in over here to the right. Let's look at the next question. It's related. Wow. Okay. I'm loving this. And all I love is from a data collection standpoint. I asked the question, is racism, prejudice, and discrimination in the United States getting worse, improving, or staying the same? And it's 20, 26, and 26. But basically, all of the lines look like, I mean, it's almost a three-way tie, which I think is so much more interesting than when we're like in massive agreement about something, at least from a sociological standpoint. So why do you think it's getting worse? Why do you think it's improving, or how, or staying the same?
So I said that it's getting worse because actually right now I'm taking a intro to ethnics class, and there was a report done in like the 1960s called the Kerner report, and it was like how segregated and everything like the US was, and if you were racist or not. And then they redid that report in 2015, I think, and it was actually shown that it was we are more segregated now than we were in the 1960s.
Yes, and I am aware of that. Good, a data driven answer. I appreciate that, to be sure. Thank you. Who else?
I had a really hard time with this question because it's, comparing the past, and while things have changed dramatically, I think it's really hard to say if that's better or worse. Because sure, it's not like legal to, have segregation, all the Jim Crow laws are gone, but there's still systematic racism, there's still segregation, there's still gerrymandering, and they just found like all the loopholes. So it's I think it's a very tricky question. So I said staying the same. I didn't know about the report, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, it's a really difficult question.
It is. I think that's why we're so split. I mean, almost exactly evenly. Good. Anybody else? Staying the same, getting worse?
So I actually said that it was improving. And my reasoning isn't that it's good now. My last argument was that it was
Right.
still
Sure.
bad. But I think that it's improving, or it's at least getting a higher likelihood of improving because of how invested like the media and our generation is in spreading the word that this is happening. So maybe it's not better now, but people are actively taking steps to rectify the situation. And that's why I said improving instead of staying the same or getting worse, because yeah, it's still not good, but we're taking the right steps.
I mean, obviously, I mean, it's so very interesting. And I've been doing race relations for about 25 or 26 years or so. I don't know. So somewhere around there. But we have a very interesting microcosm of race relations just over the last year in regards to the things going on in this country that have been sort of historical and repeated and new movements and where this is heading and what the response is. And I think that the last year alone in race relations, I can't imagine it. I just can't think of a time in my life when there's been more going on that is positive, and also a giant mirror up that says it's the same as ever was. So yeah, excellent. Someone who lives in the center, and I read this already, but the civil rights movement happened where it happened, I think, taking large steps in the right direction. We're also taking some steps in the wrong direction as well. Good. Anybody else on the staying same, getting worse, getting better piece? All right, let me switch over here then and do a screen share. Here we are. Good, good. Okay. All right. Wow. Okay. Multiculturalism. All right. So there's a lot to think about here, but none of this now today is going to be the only time that we talk about race and multiculturalism and equity. It's impossible to look at any of the chapters that we have and not make those things, gender, whatever that is, be reoccurring themes. So again, as we move forward, keep in mind what I was talking about. So multiculturalism, a perspective recognizing the cultural diversity of the United States and promoting respect and equal standing for all cultural traditions. I like this definition. I have seen it, I mean, I'm pulling from many different sources over a long period of time. I like this. Recognizing the diversity of the United States, promoting respect and equal standing for. Now, really, I can't see it any other way. That was the initial promise, right? Equal standing for and to promote respect. This, to me, seems like it covers it all. Not only a good test question, but a good way to understand the importance of not only the promoting respect, but, it's like teachers. We see so many jokes about teachers that are like, oh, they just do it because they love their job. How about forgetting all of that and pay those people? Show them the money. And I think that people don't want just like to be respected. They want to understand on the basis of multiculturalism, race, and diversity that there is equal standing that we are working towards. We know that doesn't exist. And I would be the first to say that I'm not sure, after doing race relations work for many, 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 many years of my life, that we'll ever see this. But I also don't think we need to see this. Oh, I'm stretching. Oh, that feels so good. But I'm also reaching for the ceiling because the inequality is even greater than my stretch. Okay. So U.S. society downplay cultural diversity. Certainly historically, and even now, we've defined ourselves in terms of our European immigrants, especially the English. And so we're going to break it apart into a couple categories, and that is disadvantaged or dominant and disadvantaged, right? Majority and minority culture. And I have to say that the way that we talk about it in sociology is different than the way that you might talk about it in other arenas, because we're not just talking about numerical standing here, we're talking about equality. So, I mean, that otherwise sociologists would list women in the dominant category of people, but we don't. Even if the percentage is greater than half, that doesn't mean that those people have a proportionate share of power in regards to that gender piece. Okay, so yes, these are long, but go back if you need to, if I pass by them and pause it or whatever. Minority and majority group. So majority group, any group that is dominant in society, any group that enjoys more than a proportionate share. So look, we're not even trying to get to full equal here in our sociological breakdown of this, right? We're talking about more than a proportionate share, okay? Understanding that things are going to be a little unequal, but the inequalities that we're looking at are statistically like far more than barely proportionate, right? Of wealth, power, or social status. Okay, so we're not just talking about money, right? We're talking about things that we are going to be defining all semester long and talking about all semester long that we talk about time and time again in sociology. That's power and access. Power and access. What kind of power do you have? All right, in the midst of writing this down, I'm not asking necessarily, maybe in the past I've asked this and I've walked around class and I've said, how much power do you have? So this is at least something for you to think about, right? How much status, or what is your status in society? So usually a majority group is in a position to dominate or exercise power over another group. Look, comma, and I know that I have this somewhere, but and they do, okay, right? Have you run across the blue-eyed, brown-eyed study? Raise your hand. That's Jane Elliott. More people are finding out about Jane Elliott more people than ever today. I think it's fantastic. Have you done this, or in high school, heard about the Stanford prison experiment, right? Like if you're in that, these are all things you likely heard of. If you're in those positions of power, you are in a position to abuse that power, and oftentimes people do, right? Even if they're put into these like simulation exercises for a short amount of time, wow, it really can take off. Okay, minority group, any group that is assigned an inferior status in society, a group that has less than its proportionate share of wealth, power, and social status. Oftentimes they are, or minority group members are discriminated against by those in the majority. Okay, so they're basic, but the way that we look at them in sociology is not very basic. It's very like multi-dimensional, right? Minority majority is oftentimes determined by race and ethnicity. We will distinguish between the two, like I've said before in class. Just because people say drugs and alcohol to make sure that alcohol gets off the hook, that is, alcohol is a drug. Bring it in here, right? Reel it in. They are different, and their similarities, so we'll talk about that. It can also be gender, sex, physical disability, relationship orientation, ability, sexual orientation. That's not my favorite term as we're moving away from some of these constructs. I think, like I said before, relationship orientation might be one of the the things that, and we'll talk about that too this semester, that I like to look at or use it differently. But again here, right, sociological usage differs from our numerical usage, okay? Looking at South Africa, who's the minority and the majority, traditionally. And then how is that power split up? Those are very different things, right? If we look at the percentage of on a dollar or whatever that people who identify as the gender female make in relationship to people who identify as gender males, wages. We know that that is still this way. And that doesn't exist in a vacuum. This happens, like I said before, what's important in the sociology class is this timeline. This is the past, and this is nowish, and this is the future, right? So a group's role and status, not its numbers. This is a great test question, or at least make sure that you have the idea that sociological usage is different for minority majority than numerical usage alone. Majority is going to equal dominant. Minority is going to equal subordinate. All right, so we've got a list here. Make a list of who is in each group. I have a fancy 3x5 or 4x6 card. You can write it down in your notebook, whatever that is. All right, so if we are going to make two lists, majority on one side, minority on the other, let's think about culture in the United States. Who's in what category, and based on what? So I think you know what I'm asking.
I would say that women are a minority group.
All right, absolutely. Based on a lot of data, minority. Okay, who else is on which list? What's our majority list look like?
White people.
White people. All right, so people of European descent. You could be pale and freckled and burn in the sun within 30 seconds like me, or I've never really truly seen a white person, but we know when it comes time to check a box, right? That's one of the things. So yeah, people of European descent are majority. Who else is on our majority list?
The wealthy.
Heterosexual people.
Yes, heterosexuals. Who else is on our majority list?
The wealthy.
They're a minority statistically, but of course, yes, because we were just talking about power and access. So absolutely, people who have wealth, and I would say dominant, because it's almost misleading to say minority or majority, right? Who else is in the majority group?
Males.
Okay, people who identify as gender male. Who else is in the majority group?
Cis people and Christians.
All right, we've got some dominant religion there. Christianity, absolutely. Who else? What age? What ages are we looking at for dominant age, or not necessarily majority, numerical, but dominant age?
Middle-aged white men.
Sure, so somebody maybe from 30 to 60, but at a certain point, you're working at a McDonald's because you're young, right? And there's only so many jobs available to you, or like Walmart. And then when you're older and you're 90, there's similar jobs available, right? So we know that there's ageism that goes on. I would say more middle of that rather than very young or very old. Anybody else? All right. And then we can just say, most other groups are in the other group, right? Most other groups that we didn't identify would be minority or subordinate status. So multiculturalism, you've heard of this, si pluribus unum, out of many one. I think a lot has been made, again, just in the last month, about like racial reconciliation and working together as a country. And some of it is very real, and some of it is under the guise of, some of it is just ridiculous, right? But I think it's important and it serves a function. So this model symbolizes, not only our sort of national political union, but the idea that people that are here have these experiences from everywhere. And they're here, we're here in this culture together, forming a new way of life. So when I was a kid, I remember this, like, it was like a melting pot thing, right? And it was like that, I'm just a bill, like after school rock or whatever it was. And they had all these different ones, or some schoolhouse rock. Anyway, and I know that they use the melting pot. I remember that. But the problem with the melting pot analogy is that it's connected to assimilation, right? And if you're going to say, we all just jump in the same pot together and we're all Americans, be like Americans, who are we really saying be like? And I'll wait for an answer.
The dominant culture?
Yeah, absolutely. We're saying be like dominant culture, jump in here, we're all together. But the people in charge, the people that are defining who you or what you would assimilate to, that doesn't really account for, all right, now I know I'm going to just get on myself here for this because food analogies, I know. Jason, you're taking it too far. But in reality, when you eat like a salad that's done right, you can like taste the dressing. Well, actually, if you do a salad right, you should taste nothing but ranch. Let's back up. Just in case there aren't anybody out there that are just, in love with mayonnaise and ranch like myself. Let's just say that you want to be able to taste everything. You want to be able to taste the onions and the pepperoncinis and a little bit of pepper on that. And I have some Parmesan cheese. And how about we mix a little butter lettuce with some romaine? Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's do it. Woo! Now I'm like excited to eat. I haven't eaten yet today, and I'm building a salad, which everyone. All right, so what I mean by that is it maintains its individuality. And that refers to pluralism or relativism, okay? And I'll talk about relativism or pluralism, and I've already said that. Day one, I told everybody in here, the most important thing that I'm going to teach you all semester long is cultural pluralism. I said that, being able to see things from another person's perspective that is different than your own. That doesn't mean you feel that way forever, but that means that if you want to know what it's like to experience life as somebody who identifies with the gender female, you listen. If you want to know what it's like for somebody to experience a different race, right, you listen. And that's the piece right there. You listen and you try and understand. Even that doesn't mean that you're going to be that, but you're picking up diverse perspectives. So historically, and like I said before, depending on the school district you're in, the amount of money that they haven't had forever, in places in Texas, a lot of places across the South. A lot of history is reported from the English and from European points of view. We could even talk about maps and how maps are Eurocentric and United States centric and dominant, where they put it and what does the United States look like in relationship to Africa and what are the real sizes of these continents. But we're getting to this Eurocentric idea, and you should know the term. Dominance of European, especially English cultural patterns, right? And of course, this comes up in all sorts of different ways. Debate that the United States language should be an official language, talking about immigration policies, and what's that look like. And then that brings us, I guess, to, I asked everybody in here, and I'm not sure if it's the bow tie that makes that kid look smart or if it's his hair. Let's stop the share for a second. I asked the class, and I said, should bilingual education be mandatory in the United States schools? 55 said yes, 21 said no. I like this split because it's interesting. So why yes or why no?
I think yes, just because a language is more than just like being able to communicate with others. It's also teaching you about a different culture. So it really broadens your horizon as far as being able to understand how different people live and communicate.
Okay, great. Who else?
Just personally, from experience on my friends.
I think Aubrey, maybe type because your microphone is sounding like it needs some help. Sorry.
Does this sound better?
Oh, that's so much better.
Okay. So just personally, from personal experience, I guess in high school, all my friends, they were from other countries, and just them, a lot of them, like in other countries, they're given that education. Like they are bilingual. Some of them even know 3 other languages.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just ridiculous in a way that we don't have that same opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I like most about what you said is opportunity. You know, speaking another language opens up a lot of opportunities. And I would say this, if we're going to talk about brain function and cerebral or cerebellum development and things like that, you know, learning multiple languages is linked to brain development in positive ways. Great. Carmen or Lindsay?
I said that it should be required because I think it's a little egocentric to think that everywhere you go, everybody should just know English and that you can walk around and, you know, travel and that everyone should just understand me instead of trying to like take part in other people's culture and be respectful and say, you know, I'm going to try and learn this to like communicate with other people rather than just expecting people to understand you.
Yeah. And yeah, and who knows where that's headed with technology. All right, let me pop back over here and screen share again. All right, so ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, different. Ethnocentrism, and be able to distinguish this on the first exam, the practice of judging another culture by the standards of one's own culture. So many examples, right? So judging another culture by your own standard. Well, they do that, but we don't. Well, wait a second. You know, when you say that, are you looking at things through your own perspective? Do you have an idea of the cultural perspective that you're actually talking about? So you're assuming at that point, right, that your own culture and way of life are superior to all others. And I did ask that question back, right when I started the chapter. Do you believe United States culture is superior to other cultures? And furthermore, this idea that your culture knows how things work and how to do things, that's exhibited by people everywhere. That's not just, you know, a character trait of people here in the United States. So we don't need to get to this one just because there's so many. Can you give an example of how ethnocentrism can generate misunderstanding and conflict? Yes, we have plenty of those. All right, so cultural relativism, or it is also called cultural pluralism. Here we are on this day in February, back to what I told you would be likely the most important term that we would talk about, and that is cultural relativism, pluralism, the practice of judging a culture by its own standards, right? I mean, you might be unfamiliar to those values and norms. It requires us to put aside cultural standards that we've known our whole lives. And I would say this is the, you know, positive alternative to ethnocentrism, which isn't positive. So cultural relativism or cultural pluralism, it's the skill that I want and that I think is most important for every, you know, sociologist, you know, to have a grasp on. And now that we're almost a month into this, you are almost professional sociologists. And so here's it again. Just a little bit more as we look at academic perspectives, worldview by which we understand the practice of another society in terms of that own society's norms and values, not our own. And etic perspective of the outsider, right? And emic perspective of the insider, someone that belongs. These are Latin, you know, prefixes. So etic prefix, perspective of the outside, and then the insider would be emic. And so, you know, how do we, I talked before about how we see things sociologically. Like, how do we see sociology? Well, one of the ways, right? Number one, I think I talked about was being an outsider, not being a part of the dominant group, wherever that is. Maybe that's a gender piece. Maybe that's an age piece. Maybe that's a race piece. Maybe that's because you traveled to somewhere else in the world that's a cultural piece, but very important. And then here, applying theory, and this is just, look, again, structural functional approach, conflict, and this is sociobiology approach. It's not the one that we're using most often as we're looking at interactionist, but this is, you know, a little bit more theory for you to have from culture. Then I've got a link to the Sustainable Living Association, which is one of my favorite groups to work on. Okay, I'm gonna head back up to the top. Food Matters paper is due, I think, in April 12th. You can look that up online. What format will the exam be? The exam will be 50 questions, multiple choice and true false. They are worth 2 points apiece. Well, Jason, I don't like true false and multiple choice questions. I don't like those tests. Well, I'm sorry. I can tell you this, though, that it is difficult to write any kind of a perfect test, whether that's an essay test or whether that's multiple choice true false. So here's what we do. If we get to the test and the next day we look at the data, because instantly, I guess not even the next, well, yeah, it's the next day because it's open for 24 hours plus. And Saturday afternoon, we look at the data and it looks like there's 2 questions that a majority of the classroom missed, right? Then we will return those points and say, yep, those 2 questions are bad. You got back 4 points. Those were already added in, blah, blah, blah. Just so that you know that whether I'm talking about like access in this class or whatever, I want it to be equitable, right? And for it to be equitable, that means that teachers can make mistakes. The test can be imperfect. Oh, wow. Good golly, Miss Molly. But just reminding you all, it's, you know, but it's a good avenue in a big class for us to be able to test some basic information. And then you, of course, are working on your writing, and we're working on our discussion and our cognitive development in all sorts of ways that I think are much more important. So multiple choice, yep, thanks. All right, who has got a question about, just as we wrap up today, about anything in this class? Is it timed? Do we want to use any type of lockdown browser? No, I'm not using lockdown browsers. I would like you to take the test and not use your notes. That being said, how could I possibly enforce that? Nor am I interested in it. I would like for you not to cheat on any of these assignments or writing assignments or anything like that. If you do, you're just making yourself less use or more useless as compared to the people that would learn the information. So, I mean, that's, you know, that's your deal. I like to think of things in terms of an honor situation. Eurocentrism is just seeing things from, you know, the perspective of Europe, and an English, oftentimes, you know, perspective. Yeah, it's timed. It'll be about an hour long. Maybe there's 75 minutes that we give. Maybe we give 50 because that's so. Usually I split and I you know, go in the middle, 60 minutes. So yeah. Other questions, clarifications about any cultural piece, anything that's going on in the world that you're curious about sociologically? Anything else? All righty. All right. Well, look around. It's quiet here today. The boys gone on Monday, Wednesday. It's amazing. I love them, but I did just spend a year with them straight. Actually, I've spent 15 years and 13 years with them straight. I love those guys. You should see our Legoland. You've never seen a Legoland like our Legoland. Someday I'll show you that. It's on chapter 1 through 3. Yep, it is. Absolutely. Would it ever be able to see a picture from my phone? Let me see. Oh yeah. All right. Let me bring you a picture that I think might be a good one. Okay, this is a picture of our Legoland. Starts way down here at the bottom, goes way up to the top. It's like the Legoland itself is like at least 4 feet tall. Yeah, that's right. You see the Millennium Falcon there? We threw that in there this week. Anyway, my boys and I do Lego Sunday mornings where we just build Legos and hang out and we take it slow. So I hope you're taking it slow. It is not open note. I would like for you to take it on your own without the help of your notes. But like I said, I'm not going to enforce that by adding technology to monitor you. That's just not my thing. All right. If you have any other questions, reach out to me. We will discuss chicken people on Wednesday, which I'm really excited about. I will also have a copy of the exam by that time, and maybe I'll look down it, and then in class I'll talk about a couple questions, maybe some terms that didn't make it to the study guide or something like that. All right. Be good people and do good things. Thanks, everybody. Peace. Happy to have you in my class this semester. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.